am on a mission for people to understand what type 1 diabetes is and why cures are so important. Having this technology, having insulin is great. It has improved our lives. It is still a very burdensome disease.
Hi, Lynn. Welcome to the Via Diabetes interview series. It's great to have you.
Hi, Olivia. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I wanted to start by asking what your diagnosis story is and also how you manage your diabetes on a day-to-day basis.
I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 37 years now, and I know you live with type 1 also, so we have an immediate bond here, as you always do when you meet someone who lives with this disease. As I said, I was diagnosed 37 years ago. I was a young lawyer here in Washington, D.C. I didn't really know anyone here. My family wasn't here. No one in my family has had the disease, so it was out of the blue. And I was fortunate enough to have an amazing endocrinologist who helped me through the diagnosis, but also told me I had to get involved with the organization where I sit now. I started in this role 3 years ago, and 2 weeks after I started, my daughter was diagnosed with type 1, also at 27, the exact same age that I was when I was diagnosed. So
that's mad. That's a crazy coincidence. Wow.
I'm definitely meant to be here. Let there be no question of that.
Yeah. Could you give me a short overview of your career to date?
It's an interesting journey because my career path was telecommunications policy, and my whole career until 3 years ago was in telecommunications. But at the advice of my endocrinologist, I got involved with this organization. And I jumped in with both feet in a big way. I volunteered in many, many different ways, served on the board of our local chapter, walked in the walks, went to the galas. I served on my predecessor's government affairs advisory committee. And when she decided that she was going to leave the organization, a few people approached me and asked whether it would be something I would be interested in. And my first reaction was, why would they want the telecommunications person? But I threw my hat in and I started interviewing, and with each one, I realized actually I am perhaps the right person for this job because I have the lived experience and I have the government affairs and policy experience, and I'll learn everything I need to learn about health policy along the way. And I've never looked back.
Do you feel like it's an asset being someone who has type 1 diabetes working in it?
The obvious answer is yes. And in fact, sir, it's yes. I think it's a huge asset because I have immediate credibility when I'm talking about life with type 1 diabetes. I will sit with policymakers and I will pull out my insulin pump and I will show them how I get my blood sugar on my watch, and I can make it very real because, for better or worse, it is very real for me. So it is definitely an asset. That said, the people who don't live with type 1 diabetes who work here, I thank them every day because they're doing this work. Now they have personal connections, but they came to it without a really personal connection, and we need these people.
Could you give us an idea of what your typical day might look like in your job?
One of the things I really love about this job is that there's not really a typical day, and I'm always running from sort of one thing to another thing. But the most important thing is that always at the center of it all is the Breakthrough T1D mission, which is to accelerate life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and better treat type 1 diabetes. Let me just tell you about today. So I had breakfast with a member of Congress this morning to talk about the importance of government funding for type 1 diabetes research. I then came to the office, and here I am talking to you. From here, I'm going right into interview someone for a position on our advocacy team. Then I'm going into some internal strategy meetings, and then prepping for a major scientific conference that will start tomorrow in New Orleans, Louisiana. But it's always different. And I do a lot of community engagement, and I love that. I love meeting people in the type 1 community and sharing stories and hearing the challenges that people are facing, which are very, very real. It really helps power our access work that we're doing to understand some of those specific challenges that people are facing.
I bet it's quite nice for the community to engage with someone who has diabetes as well, right?
So, Olivia, we have an Instabond, right? Because we have with type 1 diabetes. When we say when you meet someone in the wild who lives with type 1 diabetes, you're like immediate friends. There's just a connection to understand. I do think that there are things about living with type 1 diabetes that have made me a stronger, more resilient, more empathetic person.
What would you say are some things that you've achieved since you've joined the organization?
I stand on the shoulders of giants. Have to start with that. In the 3 years since I've been here, I've really focused, and our team has really focused on the importance of educating policymakers and regulators about type 1 diabetes and the unmet needs of the type 1 community. Because a lot of people, you wouldn't know we have type 1 diabetes. And it's a blessing and a curse. It's an invisible disease until it's not invisible, but you would never know what the challenges are that we live. People say we make about 180 or 200 decisions a day that people who don't live with type 1 diabetes have to make. We published a paper in April of 2025. It's called The Need for Breakthrough Therapies in a World Without Type 1 Diabetes. I carry it everywhere I go. I am on a mission for people to understand what type 1 diabetes is and why cures are so important. Having this technology, having insulin, is great. It has improved our lives. It is still a very burdensome disease. Another major achievement is getting government funding. And this is primarily here in the US, but in Australia and Canada, there's also government funding, and other countries too, that is going to type 1 research. But we've had an amazing run here in the US with something called the Special Diabetes Program, exclusive government-funded program that funds type 1 diabetes research. And we've been able to increase that program from $160 million a year to $200 million this past year. And we've also had some really significant regulatory approvals that the team has worked very hard on. Tzield is the first drug that's been approved that will delay the onset of type 1 diabetes by about 2 years, in some cases more. It's been approved in 11 countries now. And for families of especially young kids, delaying the onset for 2 years is so meaningful. It gives you time to care. You can avoid diabetic ketoacidosis and a medical emergency.
My next question was going to be about the rebrand from JDRF to Breakthrough, why there was a rebrand in the first place, but also how that's helped with the recognition of the brand.
I told you I was diagnosed when I was 27. My daughter was diagnosed at 27. Turns out more than 50 of newly diagnosed individuals are adults. So JDRF, Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, didn't capture the community at all. Turns out juvenile diabetes isn't really a thing. It's type 1 diabetes. And the kids who are diagnosed grow to be adults and they're no longer juvenile. So Breakthrough T1D really does capitalize on what our mission is. It's active. It's forward thinking. It reflects the work that we're doing. It's powerful. This was not a just fly by night decision. This was a very data driven decision to make this change. We talked to all parts of the community, from researchers, obviously people living with type 1, researchers, companies, globally, across the board.
I'm curious to know what went into the work behind rebranding it.
Our chief marketing officer, I don't think she's taken even a vacation yet, but she certainly deserves one. I mean, the work that across all of our teams that went into this change was significant. Change is hard, and we've had this name for quite some time, but it's been a few years now, and the response is overwhelmingly positive.
If you think back to when you were first diagnosed, what's one piece of advice that you'd have liked to hear?
When I was first diagnosed, I went to a type 1 diabetes community function, and a therapist who saw people who in particular live with type 1 spoke. And I was like tearing up with what he was saying about living with type 1. We all sometimes feel that stigma, and I would picture myself going into the ladies' room to draw insulin, to inject insulin, and it's like something would inevitably fall, and how awful that was, and I'd be like, ah. And his comment really freed me that it's something you should be proud of, really proud of, that you're able to live your life despite all of this. Mm-hmm. And that really did stick with me, and I say that to my daughter too. I also have celiac disease, which quite honestly on some days is like more annoying. I can't find something to eat. But my daughter's allergic to nuts. So we both have food issues all around. But being open about it is so important. That's one thing. The other thing that I tell her and I tell myself, and I was the beneficiary of, is find community, get involved, find your people. Like when you are with someone else, it's an immediate bond, and it's not just the bond that's important, it's a relief. You can just feel you're yourself. When I walked into this office, there's a basket in the kitchen that says low blood sugar snacks, and I teared up. I'm in my place. Find people who also live with this disease, who will empower you, who you can advocate with. Make your voice heard.
That's a great note to end on. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to meet you and to interview you and to hear your story and the work you've been doing. I can't thank you enough.
And Olivia, thanks for doing this, because you're getting the word out. Like, you're living what I'm talking about. So thank you.